driven development. I mean, this is just based on my experience, so it's not, you know, the Bible. I've been working in, just a bit about me, so I've been working in product development, I think it's 10 years ago, when someone came over to me, and this is before Schibsted, before Opera Software, and asked me if I wanted to be a product manager, and I said, like, sure, great. And then the next question was like, what's that? So I've spent, you know, I was like really naive, and I've spent 10 years trying to understand what product management is. And it's funny to see, you know, like Elizabeth talking about the tools. I got that question the other day as well, like what kind of tools are you using as a product manager? I don't know, like I really don't know. There hasn't been like one tool that I brought with me, just like a lot of theory that I seem to, like stuff that I remember that seems to be like true over time. So I'm going to go through that. And you know, I try to sort of like be mindful of not letting the tools get in the way. You know, like we use Jira, like Jira seems to be a thing like across a lot of different companies. And there's this difference I learned the other week about, you know, this, that you have epics and then you have stories. And I was very confused about that, so I was like Googling, like what's the difference between an epic and a story? And there was this like forum, it was like, you know, a forum online where someone's going, I think you'll find that a story is different from an epic in the way that so that's not important. I think what's important is, I think how, you know, the way I define my success is what happens in production. That is like, I keep thinking about that, like the impact you make in production, that's how I want to define my success. And that defines also the way I approach this. So I'm just going to share some thoughts on that. Okay, so I'm currently at Documaster. I used to work at Schibsted, where I worked with lovely Elizabeth down in Barcelona. We worked together. I can confirm she was trying to sort of like, you know, combine, have like a master roadmap of 29 roadmaps from different countries and cultures. That was in a matrix organization, so that was very interesting. But that was like, you know, millions and millions and millions of users, consumer product development. Finn.no, most Norwegians have heard about Finn.no, also consumer product. So I launched the Finn apps. Like we went from not having apps to having apps. That was part of what I did, along with a lot of things there, going from desktop to mobile. And then before that, I worked in Opera, where I was a part of launching like Opera extension technology, also to, I don't know, about 30 million users. But now I'm working in, Elizabeth went, how many people have used VIPs? How many people have heard about Documaster? A few. You guys don't count. So I've gone from, the reason I jumped ships, the reason I joined Documaster, like one, I know the guy who started it, and then two, I, like at Schibsted and Finn and so on, I was like part of defending, you know, a market position, and I wanted to be part of like taking a market position. That's like, it's an interesting switch, and also additionally it's B2B, so that also changes a lot of things, but there's some fundamental truths in sort of how you approach product development that is true for both. So, who's this? Elon Musk. So this is, do you know what this photo is of? What's he looking at? He's looking at this rocket. He's looking at the rocket. This is like an awesome image because he's looking at the Falcon Heavy being successfully launched into space. And he went from like absolutely nothing, like knowing nothing about rocket technology, no people, and he started this SpaceX. He started, I thought he bought something and then expanded on that like he did with Tesla. But SpaceX, he started from absolutely nothing and started recruiting like people from that domain, and then he does this. So which is like it's an extreme example of like a crazy vision, and then, you know, like also followed up by crazy execution, which I think is a little bit what UXDX is about as well. But it sort of like brings the questions like, how does he approach that? And are there anything like you can learn from that? I think so. I think in this presentation I wanted to talk about identifying an opportunity, articulating a solution, and minimizing the risk of running off a cliff or failure, complete failure. Hypothesis-driven development. So what is? So if you Google hypothesis, we'll say something like hypothesis, proposed explanation for a phenomenon. So that's helpful. Before I jump into the details of that, if you haven't worked with product management, this is what I show people. Adam Nash has this like really nice and simple explanation of what is a product, what is product management about. And it's like, first you have to identify what game you're playing, two, how do you keep score, and then what are the next three things to know. If you're like super confident about the next three things you're nailing, then you're in a good position. If you're really unsure, then you have to go back to number one and two. But it's a lot about measurement. And then if you have a complete sort of brain shutdown and forget absolutely everything, I really want you to remember this as well. So this is a thing that like I've sort of kept with me in my luggage. So every time I go to a new place, I will ask this question: how good are we at these different things? So I've started like in sort of like teams and departments, and seen that yeah, we're really good at execution, but we're horrible at insight. So what we're executing, what we're launching into production, is just like 95% meaningless. So that means okay, we have to hire people and staff up, and they become really good at those three areas. So yeah, insight, solution, execution, and that's basically that is like how you execute on hypothesis-driven development. So you could change this sentence a little bit and say, well, I'm observing something. I'm seeing a problem. Now, what could be a proposed solution for that? It's as pretty much as it's not that hard, I think. But the context of it might change a little bit. So this is Reed Hastings. He's very quotable. And he said this thing where Netflix is known for this like pivot, going from like shipping out DVDs and then to streaming. So this happened years and years ago. And when he got asked that question, he's like, oh, so you're really known for that pivot. And he said, it's not a pivot. The core business has always been the same. It's just a different channel, more efficient one. But I think he has a very, very good point. I think you have to look at what you're doing and think, are we incrementally improving what we got? Or are we at a place where we radically need to sort of like change? And most of the time, you're just incrementing what you have. And some of the time, like when you're trying to take a market position, just, everything is up in the air. Everything is in flux. So there's just so much uncertainty there. And then you've probably seen and known like business model canvases or lean canvases, and every now and then you like, depending on the company, you're told to fill them out and so on. And I think like with when you have like a hypothesis, it's a little bit, you have to ask yourself, who's this for? Like, who am I articulating the hypothesis or what we're doing or the roadmap and so on for? So like now with Documaster, we're hardly describing this in detail because we don't need to. At Schibsted, we had to describe it in detail because like we had to build the trust within the organization, like we've heard about earlier. So you could do, so sometimes we fill out these little bad boys, and then sometimes it'd be like this, that's great idea from leadership, and you go, oh my God, I have to deal with this. But still, like, so okay, so this is, so this happens. So how do you, what do you do with that? So you could just run with that. You could just, okay, let's build an app. It's 100% meaningless, but let's build an app. And I think they have all these like statistics for startups, but they don't have good statistics for like internal projects scale, which is And I recognize this as like now when I'm in a startup and we're trying to grab a market, this is a nerve-wracking thing to do, because like failure that's an absolute nightmare. But failing like a project at Schibsted is like, didn't work out. Okay, next project. You know, so it's the. But still, I think the failure rate of internal projects is probably like way higher. It's like projector roulette. Yeah. So I was just going to show this video. No, I'm just joking. Well, I was actually going to show, like, you know, how we structured. It's very similar to what Elizabeth was talking about before. How we structured the definition of a problem. You know, what is the solution hypothesis of that, and how you execute. It's this was the approach that we took at Schibsted, and it's just like a super generic one. There's no surprises about this. I'm really building up the expectations of this stuff.
Sorry, it goes on sleep mode, and there's nothing we can do. So.
Right.
It's protein.
No, we've tried that. We've been doing that. It's still.
All right, but okay. So, well, I'll try to explain it.
And it needs to warm up now.
It needs to warm up as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to put you under extra pressure.
Yeah. Well, I just, you know, at Finn we had this thing where, like, how do you describe your observation? You know, that's like one. So you probably want to standardize that. At Finn, it ended up being like verb is like you have to describe a problem, and that's how we prioritized everything across Finn. Eventually, like the entire organization had like a massive list of problems that we had identified in the market. And then, you know, like even up to the leadership level, they had to sort of like vote on different problems. And then the solutions, that was kind of more down to the teams to sort of like do something about. So, but it might be a little bit of a, you know, negative way to sort of, you know, view it as well. It's like everything's a problem. But, you know, it could articulate it as a need or like an opportunity and so on. But I really find that like, over these 10 years, I keep going back to the problems, like of articulating it, because it's just like easy. It's very, very easy to sort of communicate internally as well. And then the thing with like, once you articulate a problem, here's a trick that I also do. I always start thinking about how would I measure that? How do you measure that problem? Because you need a way to measure that problem in order to measure the solution. Of that problem, you know, and that's a whole sort of genre of its own, like how to test and measure and so on. But it's so helpful, like mentally, it sort of crystallizes everything. Like once you start thinking about like, very concrete metrics. So for example, at Finn we observe. So one, you have the observation. So at Finn we started. So this was like back when the sort of smartphones started becoming like more and more popular. And then Apple launched their app store, and then at the same time you could go, oh yeah, that's interesting technology. But then you start observing this. Like every time we went to and from work, you'd see people at the intersection waiting on the bus, just looking at phone. So that's an observation. And then you start thinking, well, you know, how much time do they have? When that's like probably a 20-second session. And our technology is optimized for a desktop experience with a big screen, right? So you whip out your phone and go like, okay, so this is protocol. And of course, then you have to start thinking, you know, what's the reach of this? What's the reach of this observation? How many people are affected by it? And what's the impact and confidence and so on? So this is very, very tangible. Right, this is very tangible. So you obviously you look around you, impact is huge, confidence is high, and what's the effort to fix it? So that's like more of an internal question. And then is an important last question that I like to ask as well. It's like, well, what's the consequence of not doing anything? And I think that's like very, very important in an organization where there's like a lot of feature people or like feature requests coming from management. It's like, okay, what would happen if we didn't do anything about that? You know, so, That's a annoying question. But so for back to Finn, you know, what's the consequence of not doing anything about that person having 20 seconds at the intersection? Well, there's obvious risk that, you know, if someone else were really good at that, you know, we could multiply that with everybody that you saw. That's like a lot of sessions. So if someone became really mobile friendly and did a marketplace, that's a massive risk to Finn. So we were like, holy shit, we need to launch something that where you can sort of like go from 0 to looking at an ad in like seconds. So that's like, we started talking about how to measure the success of this. You know, how many short sessions and how long it takes from you start till you have an ad up on your phone. So that's the proposed solution, you know, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the proposed solution because that's just articulating the problem, that's pretty straightforward, and then articulating a solution as well, like having a solution hypothesis, that's also like pretty straightforward. User stories, like I don't do them because there are just too many assumptions in them. Because like as a user, what does that even mean? Like of course you're a user of the system, and I can back up or I want to do this. It's just like a massive assumption built into the user story that I don't like. There's this thing called job stories. I like that a little bit better because it takes you like when I'm looking at something within, I want to, so it gives you like a context and the need. And then the outcome so I can. So that's better, that's a step up, and I like those because they're easy to communicate as well. But you know, still keep going back to problems. So here's a problem, you know, and the solution would be like, what if we just enable blah? You know, that's also really easy to communicate and get people aligned on. So that's not hard either. So none of these things are hard. But then you have the testability measurement. So this is where, you know, okay, so you've articulated a problem, I have a rough solution hypothesis, now you need to figure out if it's worth doing or not. And this is not hard either. Like none of these things are hard. There are so many frameworks and people are arguing about like the best way to approach this. Yeah, it needs to be quantitative data and qualitative data is better. But you know, it's just about collecting data points and about you. It doesn't need to be scientific. It's just about, you know, like what defines the success of this thing is what happens in production. So you just need to have enough data points to be confident that if I invest so, you know, X amount in this, it will be a success. That's what it's all about. So there's Google Ventures has this design sprint. So if you just want some thoughts and ideas about, you know, one way of doing this thing, just go to, I think it's gv.com design sprint or something like that. But one thing that I keep thinking about is like, what's a leap of faith assumption? And this is something that a lot of people skip. It's like, oh yeah, so we have this problem, and now if we just give them the app, that'll be a solution. And you know, like word dominance, it'll be amazing. But you know, you have to sort of like ask yourself, well, what needs to be true in order for that person to have that app in your hands? It's like, well, they need to, you know, heard about you. It's like, okay, what does that cost? Like, you know, average marketing budget of going from 0 brand to like a well-known brand in Norway is hundreds of millions of kroners. So that's like a leap of faith assumptions that will just magically happen. You know, that you'll solve distribution somehow, or that users are, you know, actually interested in sort of solving the problem. You know, there's just like all these like leap of faith assumptions that I think is useful to just write down, because they can, this is where it normally fails. And then, this is such a cliche, having a Steve Jobs photo there, but I think this is also so true. Like I've done so many user interviews and user testing, and they're extremely valuable, but and focus groups and so on. But I think the most valuable thing is like when you show people something. You know, not just like if you ask for an opinion. There's a book called The Mom's Test or something like that, and that is like, you know, if you ask your mom, it's like, is this a good idea? Your mom will always go, yeah, that's amazing. Did you come up with that? That's great. and you know, people have this like tendency to give you good feedback because they don't want to disappoint you. So I think, you know, it's better to just like try to fake it and show people. So Documaster, I think I forgot to tell you what Documaster is about. So so Documaster, what we're trying to do is, so one observation that we're seeing is like there's so many companies where documentation is important. Like, you know, law firms, shipping, oil and gas, and so documentation is important. But when we've been talking to those companies, it's a mess. And we're looking at what they're using. It's like often like folder-based, like SharePoint, Box, or these like enterprise SAP solutions, and it's a complete mess. So we've been asking ourselves, like, why isn't there like a Dropbox but for, you know, focused on enterprise documentation? So Dropbox is designed for consumers. Why haven't someone done like a really user-friendly alternative to all these enterprise solutions for documentation? So that was a quick version. But in order to understand the problem and so on, so you have to get out of the office. I think we talked to about 150 companies. So this is B2B, and the first question was like, how the hell do I collect data points? At Schibsted and Finn, it's easy. You just like go out into the street, like with Lips as well, just go and talk to a random person. And I was like, have you used Lips? And it's like, yeah. And then you just ask questions. And for me, it's like, how do I, you know, talk to someone in like oil and gas? I didn't even know anyone in oil and gas. So the first thing I did was like, I got a guy on board. His name is Lars, and he just is like fearless. He just calls. And he's just like, hey, yeah, we're building this new thing. I'll have to show it to you. It's awesome. And he's like driving me along. He's like, what we're showing this? I don't know. That's your domain. So we go there when we had so many awkward meetings, but we did like at least, I think we did like about 50, and then we went like, there's definitely something here. Like we can see a pattern here. And then, okay, so let's start, and now work together with like Svenning is also here, on like, you know, let's start faking a solution and like start showing it to people. It's like, oh, we showed it, and like, sometimes it'll be like, no, this is not interesting, but every now and then it'll be like, oh, crap, this is really interesting. It's like, how far are you away from having a product? It's like, not far. Just around the corner, just gotta recruit a team of people. Do a little bit. On the right hand side is the actual implementation. So this is like, you know, what do you call it, MLP, like minimum lovable product that we shipped, you know, this week. So you can see that it's like eventually it turned out being like pretty similar. So, but yeah, faking it, that's, I think that, and showing it to people, I think that's the way of doing it. And you have to remember this, like if you ask 3 people, like your data, that's not enough data points. You have to get really uncomfortable and just ask, you know, hundreds of people. So that's yeah. I wish you could have seen some of these meetings though. It's been awkward. And this is fundamental thing that I hold true always. It's so easy to default to like the office chair. Go to the office and get caught up in these like forums that debate the difference between like epics and stories and Jira, for example. I'm going to reply to that. It's like, I don't know if you've heard about Nihito. It's just a silly term that I think it stands for nothing interesting happens in the office. So just because like you remember that, you know, what you put into production is at the mercy of your insight. That insight's not going to come from inside the office. That's going to be outside. So like the more you're outside, the more you're like outside your comfort zone, the more insight you're going to start basing your solutions on. So just really have to do that. Go APE is like another acronym, like analyze, plan, execute. Analyze, plan, execute. So just keep doing that in iterations. So that was it. So there's nothing hard about this. There are millions of tools. I think like based on 10 years of experience, the hardest thing is doing like execution. That was it. That was the last slide.